Hi, and welcome to the Assembly Lines podcast. I'm Chris Torrance. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy these days. In this episode, I want to take a look at an Apple IIe that has some mysterious keyboard problems. So let's get started. Before I start, I wanted to put in a quick plug for Juice GS magazine. I just got the most recent issue in the mail, and Ken Gagney, who is the editor, has done a great job at putting the latest issue together. There's some really awesome articles on the Z80 processor for the Apple II. There's another article on porting modern games to the Apple II, including things like Kerbal and Portal. And then there's another article on writing relocatable assembly language code. So if you don't already have a subscription, I'd strongly recommend that you get one, and I'll have a link in the show notes. So I have this Apple IIe that I use normally for testing and debugging of cards or other machines, but mysteriously a couple weeks ago the keyboard just started flaking out, and specifically there were 5 keys that stopped working. So it was the 7P, U, the plus equal, and then the less than comma keys. And you can see all the other keys work fine around them. It's just these keys, when you hit them, nothing happens. So I don't quite know what could have possibly happened to this machine. I wasn't actually using it for anything at the time. I just turned it on and it stopped working. So let's go ahead and we'll pop out the keyboard encoder board and see if we can diagnose what might be going wrong. The Apple IIe has a fairly simple keyboard. Essentially, it's just a bunch of key switches that are aligned in a matrix and then go straight into the motherboard of the Apple IIe. So because there were so many keys failing, I thought at first maybe it was the keyboard encoder chip. So this is the KR3600, which is used in the Apple IIe to decode the signals from the keyboard. I took it out and I swapped it with a known good one from my other Apple IIe, but it didn't make any difference at all. I think there might be a couple problems going on with this keyboard. One problem looks to be the actual cable itself. If we look in the Jim Sather book, Understanding the Apple IIe, under the keyboard encoder section, we can see that the keys that were breaking, including P, equal, comma, K, U, 7, as well as the up and down arrows, are all controlled by line 25 on the cable that runs from the keyboard to the Apple IIe. And so if we just use a multimeter, we can test out that actual cable line. So first, just for comparison, here is line 26, and that seems to work fine. And now if we actually switch to examine line 25 and use the continuity tester on that, we can see that we don't get any signal at all. But there's still another problem because some of these keys don't still work. So it looks like 7, U, K, and equal now all work. There's still a couple problems with some of these, and these are probably just bad key switches, so we can go ahead and just replace those. A lot of retro computers back in the day used key switches from Alps, which is a Japanese company that was originally formed in 1948. Alps made key switches for the Apple II, the IIe, and the IIc, and as well as other retro computers. One of the keys on this Apple IIe that doesn't work is the backslash key. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to see how to take it apart and try and fix that key switch. So to remove the actual keycap, it's easiest to just use either a screwdriver or a chip puller, and then just kind of work your way underneath, gently pull up, make sure to not bend it sideways so you don't snap it off. And you can see here's the key switches, and these are Alps, and they're known as long stem key switches, and they're held on in the front by 2 little tabs on either side, and on the back they're just held on by the solder. So some of these key switches on these old computers also have screws holding them down, like for the 2 Plus. But for the IIe, it's just held on by the solder and the 2 little springs on the front. So let's go ahead and I'm going to use my Hakko FR301 desoldering tool to remove those. So let's make sure we have the right one. So it's this one here. And that came off nicely. And what you can do is just kind of wiggle these back and forth just to make sure that they're loose. And then on the front, so right here you can see the two little tabs on either side. And so if I just put a screwdriver on the one side of that tab and just sort of pry and wiggle it up. So once you've pried up both tabs on either side, then the key switch should just lift right out. Every type of Alps key switch is a little bit different to take apart. For these particular ones on this early Apple IIe keyboard, there's two kind of gray tabs, one on each side, and then those fit into these little grooves. And so all you need to do for these is pry up the gray tab on one side, and then go to the other side and do the same thing. And once you've done that, you should be able to just gently slip the black sleeve out of the gray housing like that. And then the last piece we want to remove is this little metal retaining clip here. And so to do that, you can just take the same screwdriver and just kind of gently pry it underneath and pull up. I've actually taken another key switch apart just so I could get the little metal leaves out and show you how they work. So in this Apple IIe key switch, those metal leaves are in here, and it's two little pieces of metal, and they're separated by a very thin gap. And when the key switch is pushed down, it causes the little metal tab here, the retaining clip, there's a little bump on it, and that presses the two pieces of metal together, which causes them to connect and then connect the switch itself. So here's the two leads that go through the bottom of the key switch and get soldered into the bottom of the board. So a lot of times with these key switches, there's two things that happen. Either the retaining clip gets bent so that it's no longer pressing down as hard, and so it doesn't make contact, or you actually get dirt between these two little metal leaves, and so then it can't make a good contact. There's a couple different things you can do to restore life to these. So the first thing is, with the metal sleeves, you don't want to actually take them out because they're really hard to put back together. But what you can do is just very carefully with a screwdriver, just bend them apart slightly and then spray contact cleaner in between and make sure it dries very carefully. You don't want to flood it. What you can do with the retaining clip is just bend the little feet outward a little bit, and that'll actually just provide more force when the key switch plunger presses down against this. So let's go ahead, now that we've sprayed this one and we've bent this just a tiny bit more like that, let's go ahead and reassemble it. So we can get out our multimeter with the continuity tester and then just attach the two alligator clips to the leads on the key switch and just try it out. So that looks good, so let's go ahead and solder it back in and we'll reassemble the keyboard. So with just a new cable and some cleaning up of the key switches, we were able to get the keyboard on this Apple IIe fully working again. If you have some broken keys on your old Apple IIe, it's not actually that hard to take the key switches apart and clean them out. So I'd say go ahead and just try it. Even if it doesn't work out, you can always find somebody online who's willing to sell you some key switches. So you really have nothing to lose trying to fix it yourself. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time.